Okay, so I've definitely had some students who used ChatGPT to just straight write their whole thing. I know one of them was an introduction forum on an online class where the student talked about, how he had graduated from a university in the Midwest and was looking forward to learning coding in my class. And I was like, okay, well, I don't think you double checked. I think you just said, write an introduction for me, and threw that in there. So, um, but it's really hard to know. I do think students are using it in my class way more than I'm catching them, because honestly, it's way too labor intensive to try to catch and verify every single time that a student might be. Plus, I really don't want to be, the police with my students. That's not really my um, ethos towards teaching a bit. But in terms of using it, I've also done that a bit. So I teach in the EMLS department. So we work with language learners. Recently, I had it put together. It was like 10 sentences using the present perfect about visiting Michoacan, Mexico, and what to do. And so then I took that, and then you can actually just say, okay, now make that a gap fill exercise. And I did that, and it just ran the whole thing through. And you just read over it really quick, make sure it's not squirrely. And then it was something that took me 3 minutes that would have normally taken me 45 minutes. So there's a lot of great ways to use it. But it's also really wild, as an instructor, especially any of us, I think, who are in composition or in classes where students are expected to write things. But yeah.
Right. And so Michael, you said that one of the ways that you could tell that a student was using it to submit an essay was that it was wildly not true for that student. Have you been able to develop any other cues that signal, okay, I think this might have been generated with AI?
Yeah, so I have used, what was it, AI Zero, or I forget what the website is, but you can run a section of text through it, and it can't guarantee it. And this is sort of the issue: is it's not like Turnitin where you can find the original and say, look, it's the same thing. It just gives you kind of a guess. So I would, so I think is it GPT Zero? I think that's what it is. So basically, if you have something like that, and then there's some of the text seems a little squirrely, and maybe one of the sources doesn't exist, all of that together, I think, creates kind of a little bit of evidence. Um, I have found some students who just made up sources as well. So I've definitely been in that boat where I've said, okay, well, there's the source. I'm going to go online and see if I can actually find them. And I couldn't. And usually if it's a whole made up source, I think students, they're kind of like, okay, they got me, but yeah, I honestly really don't know, especially because I work with multilingual students, and part of what they're using for AI detection is like text complexity. And my students already don't always have a lot of text complexity. So really with my classes, I'm flagged a little bit if there's no mistakes, but that's just
Right.
me. But I actually think in the future, five years from now, if not sooner, I think everybody's going to run everything through ChatGPT or something similar and just say, fix all the mistakes or fix all the grammatical or punctuation errors. And it's just going to go zip, and it's going to be like 10 times better than Grammarly or spell check or anything that they're currently using. And I think that that's an interesting conversation for us as professors too. If they're already using spell check, what are the limits? And I don't even know that faculty are going to be on the same page for decades about how we can use this appropriately. But it's fun.
Right, right. It's an opportunity. Anytime we have these disruptions with technology, it's an opportunity to just reflect on our teaching and center our work again on our learning outcomes. What do we want students to be learning? How can we rethink maybe some of our assessments so that it's really measuring that learning? Authentic assessments are always powerful, integrating personal stories. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think that just getting a sense also of how it cites sources can be helpful as well. So Ariel, do you have any tips? Have you seen how it cites sources? Like anything in terms of a research paper that you would say, here's a good way to tell if it's AI generated?
Well, I've noticed like it has I mean it is really sophisticated, and it's one of those things where I mean, Michael, you mentioned for like an EMLS, if there's no errors, your hackles are kind of raised. But I think in general, for some of the like the level of work that I see often, it, Chat GPT is above that. It just is, and like I am an English major, right? I am a writer. It writes better than I do, it writes better than most people, and it does it quicker. So it also has a language that's very particular. Like it's a very um I'm trying to think of how to say it. Like it often will use, I've noticed, maybe not for research papers, right? But it'll often use stuff like list form, right? It doesn't do a lot where it's integrating um
Right.
multiple sources into like a sentence, right? Like it's not citing
Mhm.
something with like two sources at the end. Um so things like that where it's like it's sophisticated in its writing, but in the way it's utilizing its sources, it seems to be very like this one, then moving on to this one, then moving on to um that's something you can look for. That's kind of it. I mean, at the point that you are seeing, for discussion posts, unless, yeah, it's wildly off base, like the one mentioned earlier, um, it's hard to know for things like that because it can sound very conversational. But when you get to the point where you're actually looking at a student's research paper, you're probably going to know that that's not the voice of your student, right? Even if you're juggling a bunch of students, like I'd say kind of just trust your gut a little bit, like if, I mean, even for me the other day, I was grading some stuff and I didn't think it was ChatGPT, but I thought they had gotten, I was asking students to do a mind map, for their topic narrowing. And a student submitted theirs to me and it was like really beautiful and stunning. And I hate to admit, but I was like immediately suspicious of it. And I reverse Google image searched it, right? Because I was like, this is too pretty. It was not too pretty. They did make it, so that's on me. But just having sort of that sixth sense, it's not always right. And I agree that we do not have time often to run everything through that. It's just too labor intensive. Um, but I don't think you super need to. I mean, the other thing that I would say is that having students that are early adopters of tech, yeah, you don't want to see people cheating, but I wish there was a way to integrate that and almost reward is the wrong word. You don't want to reward cheating, but utilize that in a way, in the classroom in some way, right? Like, can we take these students who have the savvy to understand this tool and use it? Because that's a really cool skill. How can we use that skill in the classroom that we're not thinking about right now?
Right, right. Yeah. And I love the focus on thinking about the affordances and how we can maximize those affordances. And it definitely is a skill. And I would really envision that this is going to be a skill that we want to help support students in developing for their future careers. I mean, when we talked about our personal usage of it, as well as some of the prompts at the very beginning, we were talking about how we can use it to save ourselves time, to generate discussion questions. And, we spend a lot of time with our course content. We're really, that's our expertise. So having those things generated, we can sort through that really quickly and go, okay, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's not good. And so when we think about having students be able to develop that expertise, that's important, but also teaching students how to really get high quality pieces. That's a skill. If you've when I did my first essay, it was terrible. I was not impressed with ChatGPT, and I would not have gotten a good grade with the prompts that I told it to do. I do want to share really quickly a post that I published today on ChatGPT, just with some quick tips. So if we're thinking about things that we can do now to support students, really focusing on those relationships and our humanity as educators. That's something that ChatGPT cannot replace, and that AI will not be able to replace. We are the relationships that we build with students has really stood out, especially during COVID. And so just really centering our work on that, I think, has a profound impact on supporting student success and also helping us navigate this time. We also, this came up earlier, but thinking about just discussing this with students and talking, this is so new, just having an open discussion about what does it look like in this class? How are we, what are some ways that you can use it? And what are some ways that I don't want you to use it? And why? If there's a reason you don't want them to use it, just really reminding students that they're here to learn this, and here's why they'll need it. And then also, of course, highlighting the importance of media literacy, and then maybe just play around with it. But as we're thinking about fall semester, we can also think about really thinking about our assessments. What are some things that we might want to maybe reconsider with emerging technologies? We talked about using it as a personalized tutor, and then thinking about ways that we can prepare students for it as they look towards the future.